Welcome to CoVerse, the podcast. I'm so excited to have one of my dear friends and favorite sort of godfathers of the InsurTech movement, Stacey Brown, on today. Everybody knows Stacey, so I don't need to spend too much time introducing him, but we are going to have a conversation about a lot of the events on Stacey's upcoming docket and where they're located. And wanted to give him a couple of seconds here to just share kind of how he got to where he is and what he's doing right now for spoiler alert, InsurTech America. Stacey, thanks for being here.
Brett, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. So tell us a little bit about how, everyone knows InsurTech Hartford, everyone knows InsurTech Chicago. We've seen InsurTech New England, heard rumors of things happening in the Southeast. So what is going on with all of the InsurTech Hartford branch offs that you've been building recently?
Man, and there's a little bit of I wish I knew, but since the day I started doing this, it's always been more about doing it and figuring it out than trying to plan it all and then doing it and failing and having to replan it all. It's
Sort of
just
if you build it, they will come almost.
no, just do it really is the thing.
Just do
Like
it.
the only way to
Yeah.
do it is to do it. I remember I went to Stanford University for some from like a training thing on design thinking or whatever it was, but they had this sign in the business school when you walked in, and that's what it says. This big sign hanging down from the ceiling. It just said the only way to do it is to do it, and that
That's
that's
yeah,
always that's always stuck with me because
true.
think about how many times people talk about things, but then nothing ever like comes to it, or they talk about it for such a long time, and eventually they get to it, but it's like, man, we could have did that like months ago, right? So
Yeah.
I try to take an action-oriented approach to this stuff. And um, I won't not to tell my whole backstory, but most people know, I spent 20 years in the industry as an IT exec, and I started to notice the trends of investors putting money into startups threatening to disrupt the industry with technology-driven solutions. And I was like, hey, I got to be a part of that. So I started running these events, and just as a means to get together and have other people to talk to about it. And it just kept growing and growing. And for a number of years, I kind of had one foot in two different canoes where, I was like maintaining a corporate job at a large global carrier, and at the same time, kind of going around the world and going to conferences and running my own events, and it was getting really, really difficult. So last year I left the corporate world in 2023, and uh, I decided as a first order to take the lessons I'd learned about community building and around InsurTech, and start taking it to other communities, because there were a number of places where I think there's strong insurance presence and strong insurance assets, and I thought that we should create some activations there. So the first place we went was Chicago, right? And I think that's where we started meeting. And so in InsurTech Chicago, there was a guy there in LA, Doshi, and LA was like really interested in making this happen. I said, let's do it together. I've got a network, I've got these lessons learned, and let's do it together. And so we started running events in Chicago. And then, I'd known Lisa Wardlaw for a number of years, and she lives in the Atlanta area. And she was like, hey,
Yeah.
what about Atlanta? And so we started running events in Atlanta. And um, this year we launched InsurTech New England, and we started taking.
I was there.
That's right, you
The
were at
first
the launch
one.
of that,
Yeah.
yeah. And we
That's
were,
great.
we were starting to do something a little different. So up until New England, all the communities were kind of focused on a very specific geography, like Charlotte, I'm sorry, or
Yeah.
Atlanta, or Chicago, or Hartford. But with New England, we realized, that allows us to have more territory. Basically, we can move things around if we want to. We can draw people and carrier companies from different places. Um, just like a little thing I would hear from people sometimes is like, well, we already do business with all the companies in Hartford, so SurTech Hartford doesn't sound interesting. And
Right.
and even though I knew that, the companies that engage with us go beyond the borders of Hartford, still having a specific city in the name, kind of, I realized how people were looking at it. So being regional definitely allows us to throw a bigger lasso around a group of markets. And so up and coming, we are soon to begin promoting, but we've finalized the detail for our first event in a new community that we're launching in the Carolinas, called
Yay,
InsurTech
that's exciting.
Carolinas. Yeah, the first event's going to be in Charlotte. And
Great.
but there are some great markets there. Columbia, South Carolina, Raleigh Durham area has some great activity going on. So this, by being more regionally oriented, we're able to kind of gather a bigger audience. And
That's
then
an interesting area. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I know a lot of we have a lot of clients at CoVerse, and then a lot of people who are in the C-suite for various companies, but have put down roots in, Greensboro or Charleston or Charlotte or Raleigh Durham, and then they kind of have some sort of hybrid arrangement with their employer, or they're a solopreneur, which is you described for your own career, kind of creating cool new things and really hungry for the fellowship you get out of a community like that. And you and I have talked, and then our friend Taffy Joe Myers and Lisa Wardlaw also have talked about sort of insurance's responsibility to community. I know that's something that's important to you, but I like how you've brought the importance of that into all of the initiatives that you're doing, because the traditional definition of a community is kind of people who live in a common place and share some characteristics. But like the definition that I like best, I think this is like a Webster or something on Google, but it's the feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. And so I like how all of your communities sort of, yes, you bring together the geographic focus and the different trends and things of interest in regional ways. Um, but people kind of seek you out to have conversations that are of interest in the insurtech community more broadly. I know a lot of people desire to get on stage at your events or to sponsor your events. How do you feel, just looking back to the beginning of it in Chicago? How does it make you feel seeing how desired it has been for major influencers to become a part of all of your events?
oh, so there's definitely the cool factor to it, right? So just I've told the story a number of times, that when I started this, I didn't set out to build anything. I just wanted to be a part of something, and I couldn't find something to be a part of. And so I started organizing, and classic Stacey fashion, like I don't let go of things easily, right? So, the last company I was there for 14 years, all right? So it's like when I'm on something, I kind of tend to stick to it. So it's really exciting to see it growing and to see more and more people taking interest in it. And it's not just in geography, but in types of roles and conversations we're able to have. There are a number of different ecosystems. Sorry, profiles in the insurtech ecosystem. You've got obviously the startups and the investors, which we've built some really strong connections and network around. But there's also on the carrier and the broker side, some really strong carriers relationships. But then it's led into things like regulators and
Yeah.
government groups and schools,
Yeah. Your
educators and
speaker, well,
students.
the keynote speaker at the InsurTech Hartford Symposium this year was somebody I followed politically for a really long time. It was super exciting to see him up there, in a insurance relationship capacity. But talk a little bit about that, because it's really neat to get somebody on stage who has sort of a little bit of a political legacy.
Yeah, I mean, geez, for the first ever InsurTech Hartford Symposium that we had was in 2019. And the mayor of Hartford was there at 9 o'clock in the morning to open the show. And the thing that makes it really interesting to know that was he had just run for re-election and won the night before. So if you can
That's
imagine election
crazy.
day, you
Yeah.
win, and then you're up at 9 o'clock in the
And then
morning,
you're
back
at an
out there in the
insurance
community.
event.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
back out in the community showing your support for the businesses.
Yeah.
So
Well, and you had
he was
Ned
a great
Lamont
mayor.
this you had
Yeah,
Ned Lamont this year, your governor. And I know that he's been, around on the scene for a while, but I think he just brought such an energy and such a perspective and appreciation for how important insurance is to making, homeowners whole, making business owners whole. And his remarks were fantastic. And then you recently had another a digital event with a person who gave a great keynote too, similarly. So I mean, you really have not just got the attention of folks within the insurance community traditionally, but you're drawing a lot of public figures uh, into these conversations, and I love seeing when they're able to stay a little longer than their own keynote and hear and interact with our groups, in the audience. I feel like you're fostering a great connective point, at a time where legs and regs and politics are very itchy for for a lot of reasons, but you always seem to bring some common ground when you attract speakers like you do, and I think that's fantastic.
yeah. Well, I was starting out with mentioning, the mayor of Hartford, but it has led all the way up to the governor's office. So it's actually
Yeah,
the last 2 years in a row, Brett, that the governor of Connecticut had been there to open up the
yeah,
symposium, because insurance is definitely a very important part of the states. It's probably the number two chunk of
yeah. A huge
GDP, right?
employer in Connecticut
It's a
for
huge
sure.
part of the Connecticut GDP, so it's a very important industry. And also, we've had Andrew Mays, who is the insurance commissioner in Connecticut, but he's not only the insurance commissioner for Connecticut. This year, he is the president of the NAIC, and he's
Yeah,
loved by many, and we're in really good regards with him and his office, and we do
yeah,
a lot of things to support. So I'm going to branch off a little bit and talk about some of the community work we do, because you hear about, like, community, community, community. It works in both directions, right? So,
right.
and thinking about Andrew Mays kind of, got me thinking about that. So, we've been really partnering with the state to try and help grow the state's captive business, right? So actually, I didn't know this until relatively recently, but not all 50 states allow captive structures, right?
Yeah,
Only about 20 something, maybe 30 of them do. So, Connecticut is up in the New England area. Us and I think Vermont are like the only two states that allow for captives. And so, the state's really interested in investing and growing that segment. But we've done stuff like that, but we do partnership things with universities,
yeah.
partnerships with other organizations like CPCU. There's a hackathon in Chicago. They're not a hackathon, they're calling it a riskathon in
Brisket-thon,
Chicago.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that
Saw that.
we're sponsoring and helping, a little bit in the organizing of it. And we've done I-Day a few times with CPCU here in
Right.
Hartford, and we
Yeah.
with RIMS as well. In InsurTech Atlanta, we had the last event we had, as of this recording, was with APIW, right? So, we've helped Girls for Technology, which is a group that um,
Yeah.
a
That's
group
amazing.
that is working with inner city girls to get them into coding. And the first year that we were working with them, we brought them in and let them pitch at one of our pitch night events. And that year they went on and won a Facebook contest where they got flown to San Francisco to the Facebook
Oh, that's so
headquarters and got to
cool.
be engineer for a day, right?
That's
So,
amazing.
we really try to do more than, I get involved at, teaching at the university level as a guest speaker sometimes, and I also help with the we have an actuarial boot camp every summer for high school students, right? So we are like,
Oh, cool.
we're
That's a
we
great, yeah,
really do a
that's a
lot of
career path
things.
you want to continue to nurture. We need our actuaries.
We need our actuaries, we need
Start 'em
talent
young,
and people, and we need young people to be interested in our industry, as we know. So there's
for sure.
there's work we do at NIA. There's I'm part of the board of one of the groups for this year's Dive-In Festival. So
Oh, cool.
we've partnered with the Hartford on diversity inclusion specific events. So there's a lot of things we do that go beyond just InsurTech. And this is a little bit of something that I struggle with. Is a lot of times people that are in our industry, they hear InsurTech and they only hear the word tech,
Yeah,
right? And actually, and I'm a tech guy by trade, right?
right.
So I feel that there's more insure in InsurTech than there is actual,
Yeah.
right?
I think that that's one thing that I've loved about your events is how much of a pull it has for people, not just in, the vendor community that considers itself insurtech, and not that there aren't valuable opinions that come from those leaders as well. But I think, you can go to one of any hundreds of conferences held around this country or the world, to learn about trends in insurtech, right? But like it feels very one-sided. It feels like you're going to a room to be pitched to by somebody trying to sell you some tech. And even at your pitch night events, there's a lot of case studies, there's a lot of use cases and scenarios that really bring the experience of listening to these people to life. Most of your speakers are already so experienced that they're very good at engaging the crowd, taking questions throughout, bringing a storytelling component to something rather than saying buy my this because it's SaaS and you need it. And I think in a way, we hear sometimes, especially on the PR side, that the media is wary of insurtech even as a buzzword, like it tones negative in a lot of publications. And I think you've kind of turned it into, again, something that's really all owned, like by all of us, and community owned. And even when you're engaging the tech side, I think this, as you said, to your background, you're really good at sussing out the story and the purpose behind some of the things that are being pitched at these events, which, we still call it pitch night, and that's great. But I think it always feels to me like there's more at the surface than just sitting, in a rapid fire exchange of SaaS providers trying to give us things. So that's one of some of my favorite events that you've held, like the pitch night here in Chicago, and then the InsurTech New England event earlier this year. I think that that's really been neat. It never feels for the audience like, you're here to listen to a timeshare presentation. You get such a sense of how we all fit into a bigger picture. And that's really great to have been able to create something so unique.
Yeah, I mean, InsurTech is an interesting word. Um, it means so many different things depending on the context and the audience that you're using it, right?
Yeah.
And some of those people would argue that that's not true. It really only has one definition, and it's theirs, right?
Or one
Um,
spelling.
yeah, well, well, there's only one way to spell it correctly, and it's the way that I trademarked, okay? So being the guy who actually technically owns the word, right? I think I can define it, right? And um, the way that, or at least my opinion should mean something to me. So
Yeah.
InsurTech for me has been about helping insurance get modern and use tech to drive our industry forward. Because and it's more synonymous in my mind with innovation,
Yeah.
in even more nuanced innovation through entrepreneurship, which could also mean intrapreneurship. It's that entrepreneurship
Sure.
spirit that drives the innovation. That's what InsurTech means to me. And it could happen in carriers, it could happen with MGAs, it could happen with a new AI startup, it can happen with any of these things.
Right.
Um, so it's a very uh, fuzzy word. Um, but
You
for me,
mentioned
like I said, it's about
earlier,
driving the industry forward. And there's three main
yeah, and
focus areas for that: culture, talent, and then innovation itself.
For sure. And I think one of the things that InsurTech has an edge over the legacy business on, which you and I both have a lot of fondness for the legacy business and a lot of partners there. I came from two global carriers before I ever started working in InsurTech. So um lots of respect there. But I think one of the things that InsurTech was able to do to the 3 points you just made is be disruptive faster, be a little bit more nimble, not carrying, physical, like just drawers full of paper along with them on the journey, because being newer, you don't have the filing cabinets of underwriting documents, right? But now what I'm seeing is the spirit of InsurTech in those areas that you're talking about with talent and culture, that has become not disruptive, but almost normalized as standards that we as insurance professionals and leaders want for our people, we want out of our own workplaces. And so as this 10 to 15 years long movement towards InsurTech as a disruptor has gone on, a lot of the favorable people quotients that you're speaking to are now really well adapted by some of the carriers. I mean, I see Zurich is a former employer of mine, and they do so many really fantastic things to nurture very young talent with their associate and internship programs that have been in place for a while, but they've really like kicked it up a notch recently. And those sorts of movements, like the ones you described about actually giving back in the community and pulling people into tech and coding and insurance who might not otherwise be exposed. I think it's fun for me to not think of insurtech as, a noun that describes a certain kind of business in our industry, but more of a living and breathing movement. And, kudos to you for trademarking it. But I think you embody yourself as a person and as a leader and as an influencer, a lot of those positive traits that get associated more with newer tech enabled insurance companies than legacy ones that took a little while to catch up.
I mean, I made my whole career out of the legacy companies. I don't even like calling them legacy companies because
Yeah.
it kind of sounds like it's a problem. And
No, and it's
um,
not. We need them.
they're the ones that are driving us forward, and innovation continues to be more important now than ever before. And with the
Yeah.
speed at which technology is evolving, the innovation is happening more and faster because it's there's just so much change going on out there. But even like AM Best has innovation, scoring has some real weighting in their in their uh, in their rating of insurers. So, I don't know if everybody's still paying attention to that, but I know AM Best is. And there was a really good report. I saw Denise Garth talking
Yeah.
about it with one of the guys from AM Best. And they have actually done the homework now that they've been gathering data for the last 5 years, and they find a correlation, which doesn't mean causation, but they do find a
Yeah.
correlation between financial performance and companies who have strong innovation programs.
Yeah. Agree. I couldn't agree more. I think it's been interesting too to see talent go back and forth. Whereas, when InsurTech was new, you saw sort of an exodus of leaders of a certain age to go start or run these companies. But it's very much back and forth. I talk a lot with Nick Lamparelli and Tony Cañas, who are friends of us both, about how rich it makes you as an insurance professional to have worked on both sides. And those are the resumes, at CoVerse when we do them, they move fast because people desire a professional who can thrive in both environments, but has soaked up the knowledge. And you have some monoline, very micro niche MGA style insurance companies competing with the global carriers, for a very desirable, industry segment type of business. The approach can be very different, but at the end of the day, how you interact with the broker and the policyholder can really turn the deal. Your relationship, whether you're a stake in a handshake kind of relationship and going golfing with your broker or your client, or if you prefer a mostly digital relationship, which nowadays is possible, I think there's something for everybody on an insurance level where we don't need to kind of segment out insure tech, meaning, tech enabled or startup type insurance companies and carriers. Best solution, for the client that needs it, hyper specialized or generalized. And a lot of that kind of lives and breathes because of partnerships and conversations and deals that get done at places like InsurTech Hartford that bring audiences who are strong all over together. I know you have an event tonight, and you also have an event a week from today, which I'm so excited to be at. Will you tell us a little bit about both of those? We'll try to recap the September 11th event before we go to your event on the 17th.
Sure. Today is September 11th. It's a hard day. I never pictured that I would get to a point where I would do an event on September the 11th. And they say time heals wounds, but I don't think it's a healing. I think it's more of a numbing. Um, but not to
Yeah,
go down that whole path. It is September 11th, and we're having an event for the first time on this date. And it's a pitch night. It's pitch night 12, right? So that means this is the 12th time that we're
wow.
organizing one of these in Hartford. We've done one in Chicago, and we'll be doing more of these in some of our other communities. But it's really been the most steady part of our program since inception. And we've had over 200 companies that we've worked with and helped out over the years through the programs we do
That's
like
so
this.
crazy. Just
And
through a dozen events to reach at that level is amazing.
and we have a stellar board tonight of judges. We have Adam Cloud from Brewer Lane Ventures. We've got Josh Curry from BMS Group, right? We've got people from the Hartford and Travelers, as well as on the agent and broker side as well, representing. And so we're starting to see more engagement on the agent and broker side, which to me is
Which is
interesting.
great. Yeah.
you know um it's been one of the hardest things to tap into, um mainly because, well, there's probably a lot of reasons, not to we can have a whole nother discussion on that, but there's a new gen of distribution people that are looking at it as, I'm a tech I'm a I need to have tech in order to run my business.
Yeah.
And tech to them is not a fax machine, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so we're definitely getting more engagement. But anyway, back to the September of 11th pitch night event. We're also a part of Hartford Innovation Week this week. So there's a lot of people in town. There was the state of Connecticut and CTIFS had a event yesterday on climate change. We had regulators from all over the country here. And then tomorrow, so we have this event tonight, and then tomorrow is the Connecticut Captive Insurance Association is having an
Oh
event.
yeah, that's right.
So there's just always so much going on in our community. It's not like every day of the week, not every week is Innovation Week where we have all this stuff, but regularly there are things to going on to get plugged into. The way we develop talent and all that stuff here is really amazing in the Hartford area. And
Yeah. Well,
so
it's like you guys are one of the largest, we talked about this earlier, one of the largest employers in the Connecticut tri-state area. I mean, in Manhattan and New Jersey. It being September 11th, I come from a town in New Jersey, Summit, that the majority of people who live there, are Wall Street, folks or insurance folks who take the train in and out. So yeah, for me today has always been a little bit of a tough day too. I think it's great that we're able to continue to, support a community that was hit pretty hard on that day. And I acknowledge how um, you're also giving people something that they can do today that does feel productive and that does kind of take your mind off of it a little bit, for sure.
And then next week, you mentioned we have the event coming up in Boston. It's an InsurTech New England event, and we're going to be focused on how climate change is driving innovation in our industry. And it's a limited seating event. We're going to be at Underscore VC, one of the better InsurTech VCs. And Boston is another very rich community, strong on talent, also strong on startup action, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot that spins out of the universities that are the big universities that are up there. And we've seen some of the strongest things we've seen, like High Marley, um, you know,
Yeah.
Findable. I still like these guys get free advertising every time I'm on a podcast. I'm drinking my coffee out of
Turn
my
it the other way.
Findable.
Use the other hand.
Yeah. See,
There
that's
you
the thing. They printed it the
go.
wrong way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm a
Wonder
left-handed person,
Rights.
so I always need a mug with the logo on both sides because being a lefty or
Oh, this is a smart thing.
yes.
But yeah, there, Boston's had some really strong startups out coming out of there. It's one of the reasons why we're starting to develop New England in that community, because there was an underserved market there. So, as we were, as had started going out into different communities and trying to take the lessons that I learned and leverage them to help other communities get started, um, I saw the opportunity for what looked like, um, to create something that happens more at a new level, like at a national level, right?
Right.
Um, and so,
Not as regionally focused as the other events.
yeah, so there's been a transition here. So because you used the word regional, so when the first community that I did was InsurTech Hartford, it's where I've learned all my lessons. A lot of lessons, not all of them, still learning. But then I met in LA. We did InsurTech Chicago, then talked to Lisa. We did InsurTech Atlanta, and um, you know, going into Boston with InsurTech New England was kind of the
Mhm.
first time we started taking more of a regional approach to things because it allowed us to consider other markets. Like Hartford's technically a part of New England, but you've got
Right.
Springfield, you've got Providence, so there are some other strong insurance areas that we can pop up in now. So so the Carolinas market that we're opening, it allows us to look at things like, Raleigh, Durham and, Columbia,
Yeah.
South Carolina. And then we did the regional thing down and we're working on a regional market in Florida. So,
Oh,
Florida
cool.
has three main markets there, that we were looking at Tampa, Orlando, and Miami, right? So having this InsurTech Florida, which has its own unique challenges and its own set of insurance companies. Did you know that Florida is the number two state in terms of um, domiciled insurance companies, number of domiciled insurance companies? Only only
I did
only
not know
behind
that. I knew
only
something
behind New
about
York.
the yeah, I didn't I knew that New York was up there, but I didn't know Florida had come roaring back. Makes sense,
Yeah.
obviously. It's like the amount of exposure right there. You need a bunch of good options. But yeah, it seems like a lot of folks are actually headed that way professionally, not just like where I'm from in New Jersey, everyone retires to Florida. I
Uh,
have a number of people my age who I work with in the insurance industry who are like, no, I'm moving to Florida because of my job. And that's been cool too to see a lot of people shifting from like that the big hubs in Texas over to Florida.
Another interesting thing about Florida is, if you were to look at insurance executive jobs, it's the
Oh
number one
boy.
state.
Yeah. Again, there, I think you get a little power once you hit a certain point in your career that says, let me work from where I want to work from, right? Like
Yeah.
we kind of all hope for that moment if we're in a corporate environment, but that too makes sense. I think yeah,
But yeah, so
you get your lifestyle that your hardworking career sustains when you move there for sure.
yeah, well, you definitely need to build a career before you move there because it's kind of hard, I
Yeah,
think,
pricey.
for young people. But with that said, we saw the opportunity to do even yet something more at a next level with InsurTech America. So we're still writing the book on it, right? In terms of what it means and what it could do. But one of the things, just to give you an example, is we have all these communities, or
Mhm.
tribes, right? Like in all these geographic locations. But there
Right.
are things in our industry that are important or in need collaboration. Um, that doesn't really matter where you are. It's if it's of interest to you, it's of interest to you. So like,
Yeah.
you know, you know, AI for P&C claims, let's say,
Yeah.
right? Like something very specific, like maybe there's 20 people that want to talk about that, right? And you know, you don't have to have a conference in a major city with thousands of people in order to have
Right.
a good, productive conversation around very
Yeah,
specific
and that's
topics.
also, I think, the new way forward, and that you're to credit for this in a lot of ways, but like not everyone gets as much out of an event with, I mean, they're important, the events that have hundreds and hundreds of people, the RIMS size and the ITC size events, but I don't know, some of the best conversations I've had have been in, small pockets. You mentioned Josh Curry is speaking at your event tonight, right?
He's
Is
a
it tonight or
judge.
next week?
Yeah, he's a judge on the pitch night down.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I've seen Josh facilitate conversations amongst less than 2 dozen people at events that you've held, as workshops or as executive boardroom meetings, and I always leave just with pages of notes because it's a focused conversation. You hear a lot of divergent viewpoints, but all in the spirit of addressing something that, again, is like a smaller subsection of our overall industry. So the big events are great. They also cost a lot, and it's, to me, it's always been a little bit more economical to come to your events, especially the one night ones. It's um out of pocket, very low upkeep. You put on really good hospitality at your events too, so have a drink, have a snack with people and talk. But yeah, I think that the smaller approach and taking a bigger value that you bring in something like InsurTech America, two different spots, like that means a lot to many people. And with a big movement of solopreneurs, with people who've been recently laid off, I find a lot of job seekers are at your events as well, wherever you have them, which is something that can't be said for some of the bigger events where, it's a couple $1,000s in a flight. You're going where people need to have the conversations, and you're making the rooms accessible, which is great.
Yeah, well, for us, it's kind of an and, right? We're not going to stop having those. I call them scaled events, right?
Right, for sure.
So
Like the
we're still going to do
symposium.
those, but we're creating this new channel, and we're the word we're using for it is guilds, right? That's currently
Wow,
the
I
word
love
we're using
that.
for it, right? So if you can imagine having, let's say, core systems, a PNC core systems guild, right? So these are
Okay.
just people probably from the carrier side, and we also do want to manage the audience. We don't want it to be tons of vendors and stuff like that because um, part of what's driving this was the success we did have with the roundtables and workshops at our last symposium. We're going to double
Right.
down on them for our symposium in 2025, which I'll plug in a minute. But
Awesome.
the uh, the thing was the conversations were so good, it was a damn shame they had to stop at the end of the event. So
Yeah.
so the idea of a guild is kind of meant to be more of an ongoing, continuous discussion amongst
Right on.
practicing professionals that have a
Yeah.
common interest. And we can have thousands of these conversations, right? So
Yeah.
we're working on, getting it off the ground, but the vision is to be able to do it at that level of scale, right? And so it's something that now that we can look at the national audience and look at it, doesn't really matter. We've got these tribes in these physical locations, and now we'll have the guilds that focusing on very specific topics with research and roundtable discussions and in-person meetings. Uh, it's
Right.
it's just another thing. Like I said, it's an and not an or. Um, but it's something else we're doing. And but yeah, we'll continue doing events like the InsurTech Hartford Symposium. The other part of regionalizing these things is so that we can also potentially start having more of those regional sized events. Um, you know, 300, 500 people for a day or
Yeah.
two, as opposed, bringing the content and the engagement closer to where people live and work and do business, as opposed to, trying to go into high-end cities. Um,
Yeah.
it's just
And also
another part of our
something that you
strategy.
can do like as your schedule suits, because again, I really like the timing of a lot of your like one day initiatives are, late afternoon to early evening. I've left every one of your events and gone to have a productive dinner conversation with other guests, or do something even more fun like karaoke after. But I think that the guilds, everyone wants a sense of belonging and not necessarily limited to stop laughing at the karaoke. But people like to do stuff, not necessarily limited to your, if you have an immediate group of coworkers that you see in the office every day, great. Many of us don't have that as a reality anymore. And so a guild style approach to meetings and communities and events and conversations, a lot of us have built sort of the peer group that we always wanted to have. You and I've never worked together at any one company, but I feel like we have, because we're always working together on initiatives like this. I think that style approach, and it's funny because it is, such a historical throwback. If you think of guilds, like printing guilds and, all of the trades that people did 500-600 years ago. Bringing that back is so great for right now, even with all the technology that people have to make connectivity easier and make access easier. So I'm very excited to see more of these roll out. With the symposium, I know you've been thinking, and we can't spoil everything because we want to save things for people, but I know you've been rethinking some of the formats and the structure. And we talked a little bit about, your awards. I think you probably saw CoVerse did 10 episodes with the Making Waves Award winners, just featuring each person who won at your event. Can you at least give us a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the exciting new things that are coming with the symposium in 2025?
Well, it's still definitely very much in development, but every year, we're, to be innovators, we try to, follow our own playbook there, right? We try to get the
Right.
feedback, voice of the customer, look at what worked really well and what people liked, and figure out how to do more of that. And things that didn't work, let's figure out how to make it better. So either that or just forget about them and do something different,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes
Yeah.
things aren't just worth fixing, right? But
The
like I
only
was
way to do it is to do it, right?
that's right. Where did I hear that before? Um, the no, this year we want to have more smaller group engagements, and so the space we're using, we're coming back to the Hartford downtown to be, closer
Oh,
to where
great.
all the action is, closer to the airports and stuff. And the venue we're looking at has lots of great breakout space. So we want to have we'll still have a main stage and we'll still have a keynote and we'll still have some of that type of content, but you're not going to, instead of having 7 tracks of big stages, we're going to have lots of little group conversations, very focused, where it's a little more workshopy, a little more discussion. The audience gets to be a part of the content as opposed to just, being in the show, as opposed to just sitting back and
Yeah.
watching the show. So that's definitely something we're expanding on. We're also looking at changing the program to a day and a half instead of 2 full days,
Oh,
um,
okay.
because it'll give people the ability. 2 things we noticed. One is um, people that need the time for travel, right? And so whatever conference you go to, the afternoon of the last day is always quiet. So why
Yeah.
you don't have to go to 5 o'clock, right? So
Yeah.
and then um, the other thing is, being in downtown Hartford, we've had this event there before, and because there are so many carriers and so many carrier people working in downtown, they want to box everything in. So they go to the office in the morning, they check their email, they come down, they hang out at the conference, and then maybe they go back for meeting, and so they're always back and forth between their office and the conference. And so, we have to, so we're by kind of shortening some of the program, making it shorter but wider, we think we'll have better engagement, because we're leaving opportunity time for people to get to be in their office each day and
Yeah.
do some actual work at the same time.
Yeah, I think that some of the, like I loved the structure at the symposium last year. You had, I got to go to both breakout workshops as well as sit in on your executive boardroom experience, which I know is was something that was so enjoyed by a select group of people who really had
That's
like
invitation
powerful
only.
conversations. It's invitation only, but maybe talk to Stacey if it's something that you think you deserve an invitation to. In any case, those kinds of meetings really fostered. I mean, I can think of at least two partners of mine who met in those rooms and then went and did a deal together. Again, some real success stories that, you know, come out of the communities that you've founded. But I love how much you give of what you've built to other people to kind of get their experience out of and network and run with things on their own. So it sounds like it's going to be another really exciting, very busy year for you. A very busy week ahead for you with two events. But we will post a link in the comments to where people can get tickets to join us on the 17th for InsurTech New England. We will talk to you after tonight's event. Unfortunately, I can't be there. I'm not flying to Boston just yet, but I will talk to you about how tonight, the September 11th event goes, and we'll recap it in a blog for people on the CoVerse LinkedIn page and on InsNerds. And thank you, Stacey, so much for talking us through your vision and for all of the work that you do to make all of this so much more inclusive than it previously had been for people, you know, with that entrepreneurial, solopreneur spirit, and also for the many companies that are a part of your communities. Yours are always events that our team really look forward to attending.
Brett, thank you for being a part of the InsurTech community.
We will see you all later. We will have more of Stacey Brown on video after next week's event. Thank you for joining us for CoVerse the podcast, a member of the Insurance Nerds Podcast Network. Thanks, Stacey.